right, 7 days after the fatal shooting of Renee Good, the aggressive tactics ICE has used to detain and arrest people in the city of Minneapolis have intensified. The federal government is sending even more agents to the city now. There are 2,000 there as we speak. 1,000 more could be on their way. According to the Star Tribune, that would make it 5 times the manpower of the Minneapolis Police Department. Joining us, former California Senator Barbara Boxer, Peter Baker, and Mark Short still with us. All right, let's talk about what we've been witnessing in Minneapolis. And Barbara, again, just to kind of thread the line through what I was saying a little bit earlier, there's a certain lack of decency in the way this administration has gone after Renee Good. Instead of waiting for an investigation or saying it's a tragedy or a terrible circumstance, they wish it didn't have to happen that way, but they understand the tension in the situation. They're saying that she's a domestic terrorist and that she deserved it in some cases.
It's a huge lie. Anyone who just reads about her knows that she was part of a group that was monitoring ICE through her kids' school to make sure that the children weren't harassed and the community was kept peaceful. Look, this whole thing is a nightmare. It's going to bite Trump hard. It's going to bite the Republicans hard. You know, you talk about spending money. You don't have enough money to help people buy their health insurance. You're cutting workers at Social Security. You're cutting veterans programs, childhood cancer research. But you have enough money to grab this woman out of her car, as you're showing now. 3 people, she's yelling. I've seen this. She was going to the doctor. This is what Trump is about. This is what the GOP is about. And I think that there are many issues we can talk about, but just seeing this alone, my husband saw this for the first time this morning, and he's a man who doesn't express emotion that much. He could barely contain himself. It's a mess. And to say that the way they've treated her is not decent, that's the nicest way to put it. They have to make sure that she and her children and her wife have some justice. There needs to be an investigation. And last thing I'll say is I'm so proud of the state there, what they're doing, the mayor, the attorney general, pushing forward. They'll have an investigation. They'll do it. They'll have enough information to make the case that she was not to blame.
One of the just to focus on the way they're talking about Renee Good, the way that they are diminishing her and turning her into a terrorist, a radical, is so brazen that J.D. Vance released a video from the officer himself, or he retweeted it, he posted it, that shows the officer filming, shows the interaction beforehand, shows what Good's last words were, which was, "I'm not mad at you, dude," and then shows the shooting, or you hear the shooting itself, because that's not on camera, that part. And then afterwards, what you hear is a voice. It could be the officer, could be someone standing right next to him, another officer, who calls her an F and B. So she just gets shot in the face 3 times, Mark, and then the officer calls her an F and B. I mean, there's a certain... And then for the administration, for J.D. Vance to repost it, can you help me understand why they would think that a video like that, with the officer calling this woman a name after he kills her, potentially it was him, I want to caveat that, why they think it was a good idea to put that into the public realm?
You know, Katie, I think that there's a way to acknowledge that ICE officers have a very difficult job. And in fact, there's a large percentage of them that are Hispanic. And they're an arm of law enforcement that is, I think, doing a very difficult job in very difficult circumstances. There's a way to acknowledge that without denigrating the victim. As you said, I don't think there was evidence to describe her as a domestic terrorist. I think there's plenty of concern that I think many of us would have about, I think, using her vehicle as a weapon, but that doesn't necessarily justify calling her a domestic terrorist or to try and, as you say, I think trying to elevate the tension here at a time when it'd probably be better to be looking to lower the tension.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it is a hard job. It's always been a hard job. But do you think this is different, what we're seeing I understand it's difficult, but do you think it's fair, Mark, with the administration, the position that they're putting these officers in?
I think that there is an enormous illegal immigration problem in the United States. I think that there were, in the last administration, I think that was one of the reasons that Donald Trump was elected, because Americans were fed up with it. But I don't know that, I in no way believe that justifies denigrating the victim in this case. I think it's a tragedy what transpired and what happened. I think that there are still ways that you can applaud the job, the very difficult job that ICE has to do. But I think that we can do it in a way that honors them without denigrating the victim.
So, Peter, on the subject of how the president talks about protesters, I found it interesting. This also parallels something we saw during the first administration toward the end, the way that Donald Trump spoke about protesters who were protesting him in the wake of George Floyd. And then how we spoke about the protesters who, raided the Capitol on January 6th. A similar thing is happening today. Not quite similar, but, you could make the parallel. The way he's speaking about protesters in Iran, saying that that he supports them and that he's going to come to their aid and that the government there should not be killing them. Meanwhile, the government killed a protester in this country, and the way he speaks about her is that she was doing very bad things.
Yeah, he put out 2 social media posts yesterday within 60 minutes of each other, and that I thought were very telling, right? The first was cascading, not just Renee Good, but cascading protesters across Minneapolis and across other cities who are, in his view, anarchists and professional agitators and so on and so forth. And then an hour later, he puts out another social media post cheering on the protesters in the streets of Tehran, saying help is on its way. We're with you, in effect. And, these are very different situations, but they're happening at the same time. People are watching this split screen situation of mass protests in Tehran and mass protests in Minneapolis. And of course, they're looking to see, how a president handles each of them. And while you really can't, compare the substance of these two, very important issues happening for different parts of the planet, you can, I think, look at the rule of thumb that Donald Trump brings to it. And I think the rule of thumb is pretty simple. If you're protesting against a regime he disfavors, he opposes, then you're heroes. If you're protesting him or his policies, then you're illegitimate. You're radicals. You're radical left lunatics. And I think that January 6th is another example of that, right? Those folks stormed the Capitol, and in his telling these days, they were martyrs, they were heroes, they were patriots who were persecuted for standing up for free elections, and not people who beat police officers and called for Mark's former boss to be hanged. And again, where you stand depends on where you sit.